Good afternoon. Thank you so much for making the way back from lunch. Um, my name is Javier Blas. I'm opinion columnist at Bloomberg in London, and it's my pleasure to be moderating this panel this afternoon, focusing on the energy divide. I mean, sometimes, often, we take for granted access to energy, and particularly access to electricity, which is so key for modern life, but still a significant proportion of the world's population doesn't really enjoy access to many forms of energy, in particular electricity. I have a great panel to make this discussion from the policy side. Several ministers who are deeply involved in trying to improve access to energy in their countries and around the world. Um, but first, before I quickly introduce the panelists, a reminder in terms of translation, we have a speaker who will be speaking in Russian. So if you want the translation, you have your headphones in your seats. Channel 1 is for English and Channel 5 is for Russian. Again, Channel 1 is for English and Channel 5 is for Russian. Um, my panel on my further left, and not any political indication whatsoever, it's my pleasure to welcome the Secretary General of the International Energy Forum. Again, we shared the podium earlier this morning. Closer to me, one step here, Vice Minister Heidra of the Netherlands, Vice Minister of Energy. Mr. Kosovev from the Eurasian Economic Union, and closer to me, Minister Moyo of Zimbabwe. So thank you so much for being here. And Secretary General, if I can again, and sorry, I'm just putting this burden on you, but use your services as the expert in the panel, and perhaps provide a bit of the scene of where we are when we talk about the energy divide and energy poverty, exactly what we are talking about, and on what numbers are we talking about in terms of the number of people that don't have access to electricity or access what we call modern clean cooking fuels.
Thank you, Javier. It's a pleasure to be here in Goa for India Energy Week, and it's pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel. Let me just give you my perspective on the energy divide. Closing the energy divide can sound very technical, but there's major, human and economic elements associated with it. The energy divide is not just about who have electricity and who doesn't have it. It's about reliability, it's about affordability, and it's about opportunity. So who has the reliable power, who can afford it, and who has the ability to turn it into opportunity for progress and build better life. Uh, when the energy is missing, it's going to be expensive, it's going to be unstable, everything becomes much harder. Many sectors suffers: health, systems, education, jobs, productivity, and small businesses and households as well. So it is have economic and social dimensions to it. Um, Despite the progress, we still have over 700 million people who lack access to modern energy systems. And across the world, there are different numbers, but it's, as mentioned even today by Honorable His Excellency Minister Buri, it's more than 2 billion people who are still using traditional biomass and wood and coal for cooking, which has very negative implications on health, and particularly for women and children.
Let me just, I want that you continue, but as a journalist and a writer, sometimes I try to simplify numbers. And to me, two things that you just said are extraordinary. One is on the numbers that you say, that means that 1 in 10 people in planet Earth don't have access to electricity, and 1 in 4 people don't have access to modern cooking fuels. I mean,
Yes.
like if we were an average of the population of the world's population, someone in this panel, probably that will be me, is cooking basically today with firewood. That is how important the problem is to me. I mean, that just when one think about that we are 5 people on this panel, and potentially that will mean that one of us we didn't have access. It's just remarkable.
That's very true. It's really putting it in perspective. And it's important that, there are now efforts to improve that situation. And many countries, including India, are working with renewed interest to sort out this phenomenon. And LPG is considered one of the important fuels that would replace the traditional biomass. And it is, interesting that it's addressed by even major organizations, including the IEF, and we have now the IEA and OPEC are also have renewed interest in pushing forward this agenda. And as mentioned today in the opening inaugural session, that the government of India has delivered over 103 million liquefied petroleum gas LPG connections to underserved households in India. And that's, I think, it's a major achievement. And I think the world needs to push more forward on these efforts across particularly in the developing countries and particularly in the global south.
Thank you so much for that. That provides a great background of the problem that we face ourselves. Let me take that now to the policy discussion, and perhaps I can start with you, Mr. Moyo. We discussed many times the energy trilemma: affordability, security, and the environment. And there has been a lot of discussion about how to get it right. From your perspective, coming from Zimbabwe, are we getting it right? And how you see this debate evolving in the next few years? You're on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank our hosts for inviting us to this very important energy week. And we look forward to further engagements because in Southern Africa, we are also having a Southern African Development Community Energy Week in Zimbabwe in the famous Victoria Falls from the 22nd of February to the 27th. So we invite those who are listening to us so we can focus on the 14 countries in Southern Africa. The issues of security of supply are upmost in our minds because we lack generation of electricity is not adequate for Zimbabwe, is not adequate for Southern Africa. And we have demand which exceeds supply. So we are attracting investments in the generation of power, and I think that is going on well. There are investments from the private sector and governments are doing something. But at the same time, we are aware that infrastructure to evacuate that electricity is needed. So our transmission and distribution networks are also needing investments. And we have now made sure that our legal instruments allow the private sector to invest not just in generation, but also in transmission and distribution. Further than that, the issues of affordability are very critical. We live in a country where the poor are actually poor. And when we now need to look at the balance between security, affordability, and in the environment, let me start with affordability. In order to attract the private sector, which we are attracting, we need a cost-reflective tariff. The investors need to understand how much they will get from generation, the power purchase agreement from our transmission company, and the transmission company also needs to be kept alive with willing power, and then the distribution. The distribution and the last mile, we are also attracting the private sector. So those who want to come and do investment in connections to households, we need to have a cost-reflective tariff. That means that cost-reflective tariff could, in fact, be against the affordability of some of our people. But at present, we want to attract more investment. The issue of the environment, we are aware that the Paris Agreement gives us indication of how much we should have in terms of contribution to the environment. But we are fully aware that in countries like Zimbabwe or everyone in Southern Africa, the issue of fossil fuels, thermal, is upmost in our mind because it gives us our base load. At the same time, our renewable energy, particularly hydro, has been doing very well, but because of climate change, droughts, we have been impacted on. So we now are diversifying into, as an expansion, into solar, into wind, into what we call waste to energy. So in Zimbabwe, we have started on a program of waste to energy in Harare, and we are doing that in other cities. But others in Southern Africa have come to see what we are doing in waste to energy, and we think that it will also become very popular. Hydrogen, yes, we have sent people to go and learn about what is happening in our neighbor, Namibia, which is more advanced. So all these sources of energy we are looking at, but the balance between security of supply, the balance with affordability, and the balance with environment is something that we put our eye to.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Hydra, what is the perspective from your country? Because one of the most remarkable things that we have seen over the last few years in Europe is that all of a sudden we have to think really hard about energy security and affordability, even for Europeans who have got used to have almost guarantee access to electricity, and we got used also to cheap energy. No,
Thank
there
you.
you are. Perfect.
Yep. Thank you, Xavier. Indeed, a very good question. And every energy minister struggles how to get a balance in the energy triangle right between sustainability, affordability, and security of supply. And you're absolutely right. Europe has focused a lot on sustainability over the last 5 years with a Green Deal, with a 55% reduction of CO2 by 2030. But at the same time, due to geopolitical forces, we came to realize that energy cannot be taken for granted. The war in the Ukraine, other geopolitical movements showed us that energy security is important. And if we don't fix energy security, prices will rise so much that the household energy bill will increase to unsustainable levels, even for rich Europeans. So, and I think there's also here a parallel for Europe and India, the Netherlands and India, when we look at how we should fix the triangle. I think in this morning's meeting we saw what Prime Minister Modi showed us about the trade deal that was announced yesterday, where we see that Europe and India want to work together, to stabilize their economies and also fix their energy relationships, because that is a multi-layered one. Both India and the European Union are heavy importers of energy. And energy security, therefore, always also means, of course, you need to tap all your natural resources, but you also, by having renewables into the system, can have more energy security. You're more certain that you can provide your own energy. And because you're no longer relying always or exclusively on volatile fossil flows, you see that by making your energy system more sustainable, you're also ensuring that there is more price stability and in the long run, affordability. Because it helps you to target policies to the poorest households if you know what the price of energy is in your economy. So I think our way of approaching it is from the perspective of an importing country, diversify, find as many countries with which you can cooperate that are like-minded democracies where the rule of law is strong, and then by making this switch to more sustainable energy, also trying to achieve more security and affordability.
Uh, let's talk about, in particular, electricity, because I think that is absolutely key. And let me just go back to you, Mr. Moyo, and then I'm going to follow with Mr. Kosochev. Uh, what has worked in your country to make sure that we increase the number of people that have access to electricity? What has been the key policies that you think have proven to be working?
Well, the first policy that we have done is to have a cost-reflective tariff,
Yeah.
so that our utility can expand. But that cost-reflective tariff is also meant to attract the private sector. And the private sector has come in heavily to invest in generation. Where we think we still need some more investment is in transmission and distribution. The infrastructure is needed there. We also have a rural electrification fund where we know that distributed energy, off-grid distribution and the power is through that rural electrification fund. So everybody who uses commercial electricity in Zimbabwe is charged 6% so that we can use that money to focus on the rural areas. Because the rural areas, while the country is electrified 62%, but the rural areas are still at 27%. And we need to increase the connections there. Of course, we also are using our clean energy strategy to assist in the rural areas and in the urban areas to supplement the electricity. We have said, let's look at electricity as an enabler, particularly for the young. And all our schools, we want by this year, all the schools to be electrified, all the clinics to be electrified, so that we don't leave anyone in no place behind. It's crucial that all the children, especially in this digital world, are given an opportunity to have electricity so that they can go into the digital world. So these are the strategies that we are using, but the policies that we have now put in our compact energy compact, has 5 pillars. All of those are aimed at increasing access, at increasing security, and also affordability.
Thank you. Mr. Kosochev, energy access has been a very important topic in the Eurasian Economic Union, and particularly electricity. And obviously, when we are thinking about access, we are talking about affordability, and the price of electricity is there very, very important. Can you tell us where are we in making sure that the price of electricity is right and that people are able to afford access to energy?
Спасибо, господин модератор. Ну, во-первых, я хочу поприветствовать от имени Евразийско-экономической комиссии. Евразийско-экономический союз – это достаточно молодая организация. Нам в прошлом году исполнилось 10 лет. И вопрос энергобезопасности является одним из самых ключевых вопросов в нашем экономическом интеграционном союзе. Надо отметить, что наше интеграционное сообщество обладает огромными запасами энергоресурсов. Мы по запасам нефти, запасам газа 20% мировых запасов, по выработке, производству, добыче 25%, нефти 7%, производства 15%, угля 20%, добычи 6%, урана запасов у нас 27% и 43% производства всего мира. Электроэнергии у нас выработка 5% мирового производства. Теперь то, что касается доступности электроэнергии в странах ЕС, это очень важный, один из ключевых вопросов. Для этого что необходимо? Необходимо 3 ключевых фактора. Это наличие энергоресурсов. Второе – доступ населения к инфраструктуре, то есть электрическим сетям. И, конечно, немаловажный вопрос – это вопрос цены на электроэнергию. Какая же особенность значит, электросистемы в странах Евразийского экономического союза? Первое, это у нас развитая инфраструктура, у нас всегда это было. Но в течение независимости, больше 30 лет, каждая страна развивалась по своим направлениям. Сейчас мы делаем шаги к тому, чтобы создать общий электроэнергетический рынок наших стран. Для этого нам необходимо привести в соответствие, значит, наши нормативно-правовые акты, и ключевым, значит, фактором это является договор о нашем, значит, союзе, где расписано, что мы должны проводить согласованную, гармонично согласованную политику. Что дает нам создание общего электроэнергетического рынка? Она даст возможность недискриминационный доступ к источникам, создание прозрачной открытой системы путем на основе биржевых механизмов. И результаты, значит, мы можем использовать генерирующие мощности друг друга, потому что один из самых больших проблем это, значит, устаревшая инфраструктура в наших странах. И когда зимний период, особенно сейчас, у нас сейчас там очень холодно, страны наши, значит, в энергетической системе могут помогать друг другу. И самое главное, чего мы достигаем, это энергетическая безопасность. Особенно в такой тяжелый период мы добились того, что, значит, сегодня мы решили все вопросы доступности населения к энергоресурсам.
Thank you, Minister. Secretary General Al-Shirawi, we made, as the world, big progress in increasing the access to electricity over the last few decades, but it feels, looking at some of the numbers, that we are struggling to kind of reach that last 700 million people, and that in percentage terms, we have been flatlining around 10% of the world's population without electricity for the last few years, and that number doesn't seem to come down. It's just as simple as the last bit of the effort is the most difficult one, or do you think that something has changed that is just going to make more difficult to resolve completely the problem?
Well, I think you're right. I think we have had the low-hanging fruits picked up, and now we are having the difficult part to reach the more difficult areas. I think it needs more efforts from everybody, whether it's countries, whether it's multilateral institutions, and whether it's investors. We need more partnership between public and private partnership in order to achieve the objectives. Today, in this morning, in the inaugural session, we talked about the energy trilemma. We talked about, energy security, energy affordability and access, and also sustainability. And one important element in order to achieve access and to achieve affordability is to have data. And data is very important for decision. It enables investors to know that there are opportunities. And in the absence of data, that hinders progress and hinders investors to reach the areas that need the energy most. I think we talked about the International Energy Forum as the custodian of the Joint Organization Data Initiative, and we collect data at the moment on oil and gas, and we have been doing this for oil more 20 years and about 11 years for gas, but we are also expanding it to other areas of sustainability metrics and maybe even critical minerals. But we do have difficulties and we face challenges to collect data. Although we work with the international partners like the UN statistical divisions, Eurostat, IEA, OPEC, and APEC in the Asia Pacific and others. And we're trying to explore to get more partners in order to improve the quality of data and the completeness and the accuracy of data, because we use country official data for reporting on on oil and gas at the moment. And the difficulties we have, OECD countries, we get much better data and more accurate data, but we do have difficulties with developing world. So I think it needs more attention to provide the data. So, analysts and investors can have access to the data so they can establish the opportunities to increase, the access to energy.
To me, as I was preparing notes for this panel, and I went to the UN website to find some data on the number of people that don't have access to cooking fuels. And in two different bits of the UN system, I found a number that was 2.1 billion. In another bit, it was 2.4 billion. And that is 300 million people, which is like a significant number of the European countries all put together. And we don't really know what the number is, which makes implementing or designing any policy very difficult. Mr. Moyo, I wanted to come to you as we were talking about cooking. A similar question that I was asking you on electricity. What is working in your country, and what is your personal experience as a policymaker on what works and on what doesn't work?
Wow. A lot of the cooking, both in urban areas and in the rural areas, has been relying on biomass. And the government's policy now is to try to get 3.1 million households in the rural areas electrified, as well as have other programs for clean cooking. The gas expansion has been expanding very rapidly, both in urban areas and in the rural areas, and they were encouraging it. We are also encouraging people to use what is simply their waste or the waste of their animals to create gas so that they can have clean cooking. And the government gives incentives in order for those to have stoves, gas stoves, and things like that in the rural areas, and also in the urban areas. So there's been a growth in clean cooking, but that's not enough for now. And that's why we are calling on investors. We are calling on particularly Indian companies that have a lot of experience in such areas as clean cooking. We have coal bed methane gas in Zimbabwe in abundance, but we have not exploited it. It needs a lot of exploration. We have explored for natural gas, and we have plenty of it now. And together with Southern African countries, we have mapped out the reticulation of pipelines, both within Zimbabwe to reach the last mile, and also the interconnections that will need to take place between Zimbabwe and Zambia, between Zimbabwe and Botswana, between Zimbabwe and Mozambique, in order to have gas flowing in all directions. So that is the situation that we have, and the Southern African Power Pool is doing its own interconnectors. So we think that in the next 5 years, starting this year, we are going to accelerate our interconnectors, we are going to accelerate our transmission line, but at the same time want to reach the rural areas and urban areas with clean cooking.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Haidra, a lot of the problem with cooking fuels is going to need support from the West, and your country has been doing a lot of very good work in that area as a major donor. From your perspective, what is working? What has been a bit of a disappointment, and where do you see what do you see we need to do next in terms of from a donor country, in terms that we help that 2.1 to 2.4 billion people that still lack access to modern cooking fuels?
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very good question. And if I would summarize it in one line, it would be work with local populations, work with local communities. We've been a donor or clean cooking solutions for the last decade, together with the World Bank, with other partners. And sometimes we've given gas cooking sets to local communities for free. And then we came back a year later and we found out that they were not used simply because the gas was unable to reach the location, or it was simply too expensive because people didn't have $50 a year to spend on these advanced cooking fuels. So the minister from Zimbabwe gave a great example where in local communities, when there's manure, when there's a cow dung, you can use something that is already locally available to upgrade it into a clean cooking fuel and work with the communities, and then it works two ways. So what we have learned is not focus on a single source, always do a multi-fuel, multi-source approach, work with the local communities, see what they need, understand the dynamics of the local markets, understand what people can afford, and with that, a solution in India might be completely different from a solution in Africa. In the long run, by getting some of the data better, of course, and sharing those experiences, we can make the next step. And it is still, that's also what the data tells us, one of the cheapest way to bring prosperity to different regions. It's not required hundreds of billions. No, it's far smaller amounts to have access to clean cooking around the globe. And the good thing about it is the IEF was already referring to the partners with which they cooperate. Even the IEA made now a clean cooking scenario for the world. Yeah. And some people were worried about maybe this is more emissions, but no, in the IEA scenario, one of the best ways to reduce emissions on the globe, also from the global south, is to switch to those modern clean cooking fuels. So for health, for the environment, for everything, it is paramount that we learn the best practices from each other and continue the revolution of clean cooking.
And that's a very important point that you, sir, are making about the health benefits of clean cooking fuels. And Mr. Moyo, we sometimes, and I think that we perhaps don't highlight it enough, but I think it's important that we highlighted that these health issues of not having clean fuel is a very gender focus. It is mostly women who suffer the consequences of not having them. So in terms of also rebalancing gender issues, that is also a very important issue.
Yes, in Zimbabwe, we work with the ministry that is responsible for women's affairs because clean cooking is very, very topical. I know one country which has done very well and has popularized it is Tanzania, and the women are very excited there. And we want to use these experiences to excite our own women, but also, as the colleagues from Netherlands have said, let's use local resources. Let's go and build biogas digesters so that we can actually have more gas rather than firewood. The consequences of using firewood, the smokes, that affects our women, and that affects not just the women. We sit around when it is raining like it is doing right now, and your mother is trying to cook. It affects all of you in the household.
Affects the woman, affects the children.
Yes. So that's why we are pushing with clean cooking.
Thank you. Mr. Kosujev, is there a perspective from the Eurasian in clean cooking, and what is the problem there? Clean, yeah.
Ну, вопрос доступности, они взаимосвязаны с вопросом цены. Вот. Я хочу сказать, что в нашем интеграционном сообществе вопрос цены – это один из самых крайне важных, потому что выработка электроэнергии, благосостояние народа, развитие экономики – это полностью связано именно доведением до домашних хозяйств электроэнергии. И хочу сказать, что именно в целом политика наших стран ориентированы на то, чтобы цены на электроэнергию были социально ориентируемы. Я хочу привести пример в наших странах. В целом разбег цен между, значит, самый низкий 1,42 цента и самый высокий 11 центов. Если взять в страновом размере, в Армении у нас 7,6 самые нижние и до 11 центов. В Республике Беларусь 1,5 центов до 8 центов. В Республике Казахстан 2,5 до 10 центов. Российская Федерация 1,2 и 10 до 11 центов. Это зависит от того, значит, есть много факторов, значит, территория очень большая, население где-то более 180 миллионов человек, и государство, значит, те дальние регионы, северные регионы в основном, они как бы датируются, значит, государством и держат такую цену. Ну, для сравнения скажу, вот мой коллега из Нидерландов, у них за 2024 год цена у них 24 евроцентов. Германия 39 евроцентов, во Франции 28, Великобритания 21. В сравнении с ними у нас, конечно, цены достаточно низкие, потому что мы используем модель развития, основывается на традиционных источниках энергии. Это на газе, угле, нефти, электроэнергии. И, конечно, один из самых важных направлений, который сегодня развивается в странах Евразийского экономического союза, это атомные электростанции. И самая важная для нас задача – это проводить гармоничную, сбалансированную сочетание энергоресурсов и, значит, ВИА, она будет дополнять то, что делается нашим государством. И то, что прописано, развитие благосостояния народа, развитие экономики связано именно с развитием электроэнергии и доступностью населения.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Hydra, do we have a global or even regional good institutional framework to try to close the energy divide? Are the institutions up to that task?
That is a very good question. I think we've recently seen in the last couple of years initiatives by the Norwegian government together with, for instance, Kenya, Senegal, other champions in the realm of clean cooking. And it shows that even though we have the World Bank, who's been working on clean cooking for the last 10 years, even though many institutions have done things in this field, the development banks, the fact that we need to close the gap and we still have new initiatives shows that there is a clear lack somewhere. And I think, of course, it also requires some donor money to work together with the local populations to find the right market model so it will work for the longer run. And what I'm positive about is, as a Vice Minister, I'm also Governor at the IEA, and we chair the Ministerial this year, and we hope to have the Clean Cooking Alliance, which brings together the richer donor countries with African friends and friends from elsewhere, that we can really use that as now momentum, as a new momentum to really close the gap and have the rather limited amount of money that is needed to close this gap brought together quickly. Because for all the reasons that we mentioned earlier, for the women and children, for the health, for the environment, for the climate, this is so clear that we should focus our money on this. So I hope that with these new initiatives, we can bring really close to the divide.
That's an important ministerial meeting that is coming for the calendar in
February.
middle of February in Paris. Mr. Moyo, when we talk about all these policies, global institutions, etc., at the end of the day, and I'm afraid that to put it this way, but the problem needs money.
Yes.
Do we have enough money?
Well, in our energy compact, we have said we need to invest 9.1 billion in the next 5 years, starting this year. And it is our national development strategy. And we have said more than more than half of that money is coming from the private sector. And how are we mobilizing it? We think our insurance companies, our pension funds, as well as our banks in country can actually partner with international financial institutions to bring that money forward. And we have seen some appetite with a lot of our insurance companies, pension funds, banks investing mostly in renewable energy. And we are now mobilizing for the the hydroelectricity power generation together with Zambia, and we hope that the private sector, international financial institutions, the private sector in and outside Zimbabwe and Zambia will also invest in these.
Related to that, the money has been, as you kind of highlighted, the money has been flowing into projects that they have, let me put it this way, a green angle.
Yes.
But do you have enough money for projects that perhaps don't have that green angle?
Well, we have been having independent power producers in the thermal area, and especially linked to captive power generation for those companies that are investing in steel, in ferrochrome. We have encouraged them to have their power generated from thermal as well as renewable, and they are doing it using their own equity funds. So we are calling for companies. For instance, we have an Indian company that has invested 450 in order to renew the old power stations that have been there, and they put their own money.
Thank you. And Mr. Heira, I wanted to conclude the discussion with you because one of the concerns is that the recent years of high prices may hinder all the efforts to reduce the energy divide, to make access to energy universal. But there is perhaps a flip side of that, that is that all of a sudden we all as the international community have realized how important is energy, and perhaps there is more attention, more journalists are writing about this, that the theme is on the front pages, the voters know about this. So is there a chance that actually these high prices can just give it a push to the effort?
Yeah, I think you're putting it absolutely right. There are many things we, of course, want to achieve when we work on development aid. We want to help the economies. We want to help the medical conditions. We want to help education. And maybe energy wasn't the highest subject on the list. And the fact that even rich countries were confronted with their local communities that face energy poverty is seen as this is more of a global problem. So it brought more attention to the subject. We've seen that with very recent initiatives that I mentioned earlier. And I think indeed now, because clean cooking ticks so many of the boxes, both medical, both gender, both local economies, and all the even climate benefits, that there's renewed global attention to closing the divide. And we are happy to work with all of you on that.
Thank you so much, sir. That concludes our panel. We will continue the discussion, but the discussion probably will continue in Zimbabwe, in the border with Zambia. But there were beautiful spot in the falls, and then we will have this important meeting in Paris at the International Energy Agency, also in the middle of February. So please join me thanking the panel, and we will continue the discussion in further locations and perhaps next year here in Goa. Thank you so much.